Welcome to Reflections, the podcast that biblically encourages, equips, and empowers women for apostolic life and service. Here's your host, Dr. Cindy Miller.
Welcome, everyone, to today's episode. We're diving into an incredibly timely and important topic. We're going to talk about the impact of the digital age on our children, families, and relationships. In the past, technology has evolved at lightning speed over these years, from the first text message sent in 1992, and some of you are way too young to even know about that. I can remember this change, this transition to what it is today. And this is the fact that stuns me more than anything. More people have access to a mobile phone than a toilet. So these just simple things we're looking at we're showing us how much the digital world has revolutionized how we connect, communicate, and even raise our children. And for parents listening and grandparents, we may feel like we do not know what we're doing. We do not know how to manage it. We're not quite sure what we should do next. So today we're going to explore the challenges of parenting in the digital age. We're going to talk about the consequences of raising children in a media-saturated environment. And most importantly, what can we do to connect with our kids in meaningful ways? So we're going to talk about practical strategies to help our children become not only tech savvy, but more emotionally and spiritually connected to us and then the world around them. We are honored, blessed, delighted to have a very special guest with us today, a woman with great insight into these issues. It's been a research topic, a passion of hers. And Laura Payne, our guest, brings a diverse set of gifts into the room. She grew up on the mission field, and she has a passion for culture, international travel, and ministry. She's worked in the field of Christian music education since 1994 and has served 3 apostolic colleges throughout her career, producing more than 10 music projects. She currently serves as an associate professor in the music department of Urshan College in Wentzville, Missouri. Laura has a master's in music education and is a licensed minister. And together with her husband, Kevin, she conducts family seminars and marriage events across the globe. She is mom to 3 young adult men, loves her dog, Maya, and enjoys ethnic foods. Yes. And I first met Laura when she was a young girl living in Athens, Greece. And this is so special to me because over the years, we become fast friends and we are family by choice. And her office is right down the hall from mine. We get to see each other frequently. So, Laura, I'm so glad you're here. Welcome to Let's Talk. And just take a moment and kind of tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what got you into this topic.
Well, thank you, Cindy. It is such a joy to be with you and to have this conversation. And I'm just thankful for every lady who is logging in, clicking in, whatever medium you're using to listen to us today. So welcome to you, the listener. And we're just really glad you're taking some time out to listen to us talk. And as Cindy mentioned, my husband and I, we have been doing marriage seminars, marriage classes, and we had the opportunity to teach our own church's marriage class. We've been teaching in our adult learning hour, our Sunday school hour, and our pastor came to us and said, "Hey, would you guys consider in our next semester, would you consider doing a class on parenting in the digital age?" Well, we had never really thought about this as a topic. We hadn't planned to present that in our next semester, but we just, we were willing vessels. And we dove into the topic, and literally, quite literally, probably 25 books later, we ended up not only teaching about this for one semester, but for 2 whole semesters. We spent 6 months in our own church congregation diving into all the aspects of being a parent, being family in the digital age. And it was really quite a remarkable dive, a very deep dive. And we walked away from it really passionate about the topic. I remember one particular moment that we were studying for that week's lesson, and my husband turned to me and just with such a sobering look, and he said, "Laura, if I could go back, I would do it so differently. I would do it so differently." And, we always thought we were really cautious, careful parents. We never thought that we were, embracing anything that was, so radical, or, we always thought that we were really protecting our kids. And yet, even in our choices, we look back and we think, my goodness, what we wouldn't give to retrace this journey and do it all over again. So I feel very passionate about this topic. I feel like I've done a deep dive into it, but it's not just research. It's not just book learning. To me, it really is something I want to talk to you from my heart and share, because it matters. This matters so much. We want to be connected to our children as parents in a very real, authentic, meaningful way. So I'm just excited for this journey together.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. And, you and I have had some conversations about this, especially when you were in the research part of it and talking about it. And I know we don't have 6 months, but it is worth at least attempting to have this conversation. I know as a parent, a grandparent, a pastor, and watching children in our church and what's going on, and I know things that I have felt and said and thought, and people are like, "Oh, you're so old fashioned," or what, or like, "You don't know," or whatever. But we do. We can have regrets. We can wish we could do it different. So I think it's a little bit better that we think about it today. And I've been praying about this, and I'm just praying for that parent out there that you feel the peer pressure. You feel that pressure of everybody else is doing certain things certain ways. And so this is really for you to strengthen you in your personal conviction, what the Lord's talking to you, specifically about. So, Laura, let's just kind of jump into it. I mentioned earlier the numbers have just increased. Younger and younger ages are having access now to phones and iPads, and we see that. So, what would you say are some of the unique challenges that we are facing? What came up in your study that, like, hey, we really need to be aware of this?
Sure, sure. I think the first thing to recognize and just to own the fact that media does not just transform our children. Like, this is not just about what's best for our kids. It has transformed us as well. We have to embrace the reality of our own engagement with media. We have to engage the potential reality of our own digital addictions, or our own digital coping mechanisms, our own tendencies to get consumed by our phones or our computers. When we were doing this research, there was one particular sketch. It was just a black and white, almost like a pencil sketch I saw, and it was a mother, and she was holding a baby, and the baby, it drew arrows. The baby's eyes were on the mother, but in the other hand, the mother had a phone, and the mother's eyes were on the phone, not on the baby.
Oh, that's hard.
And that image has really stuck with me, because I think what it speaks to me is that before we can ever expect something of our children, before we expect our kids to, be healthy digital citizens, or to be, emotionally connected to the world around them, we've got to assess what role we're playing. Media is impacting the worldview of all of us. Like, we have to acknowledge that our minds, our thoughts, our spirit is continually being bombarded by the things we encounter. If it's random commercials that pop up on YouTube, you might be watching, maybe you just, all you ever watch is Christian music videos, maybe even all you watch is apostolic preaching, but you might have to endure those little, two commercials in between every 10 minutes of content. And, the little things we encounter, it affects us. And so I think the first unique challenge is just owning the fact that, hey, we got to start the conversation by talking about us. We can't pretend that this is all about our children and our grandchildren and that we're just making decisions for them. We're making decisions for ourselves too. We are a first generation set of digital parents and grandparents, and we are navigating this with no model. We don't have a model. So, smartphones were put in hands in 2007. We're all so new at this. And I think that's the first unique challenge, is that we don't have a model before us. I think, I teach college. I think the college age children today, they are going to learn from our mistakes. The unique challenge is we don't have any.
Good thing, and then it's like, "Oh, I wish I wasn't making the mistakes for them to learn from," right?
It's so true. It's so true. Yes,
Well,
absolutely.
when we talk about having a model, it takes a little bit of time. It's trial and error to say, what are we going to do to create that model? But I love the way that it is first us exploring our own addiction, our own use, our own however we use it, either as a distraction or a self-soothing strategy or just a way to not be lonely, you know. But I want to go into this other topic, and that is the mental health crisis.
Mhm.
So from 2010 to 2020, depression rates in young people skyrocketed, and self-harm rates for adolescent girls nearly tripled. So, Laura, how much do you think this surge is linked to the digital landscape? And as parents and grandparents, what can we do to protect our children from these negative impacts? I mean, it's technology's not going away, and
No,
there's a lot of benefits to it. So
absolutely.
we can't have this, you can't have it at all. You can't be exposed to it. But how do we create protection? And really, because you are so much in that counseling world with your husband, do you think this is linked? That there's a
You know,
definite link?
it's interesting. There's a book that actually just came out. It's a very recent book. Came out in 2024, and it's called The Anxious Generation. And it's a well-loved book. It's gaining a lot of traction. Even Brother Bernard, randomly we got, as a Urshan faculty, we got a message, an email from Brother Bernard, and he said, "Hey, I'm sending this to our faculty and staff at Urshan. I think this is a great resource. It's come across my desk, and I think it's a valued resource for all of you." So, even Brother Bernard's recommending the book, and it's called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And he says in the book that when you look at the spike in anxiety, depression among teens, it is, first of all, it's across all Western culture. It's across all Anglo-Saxon culture. There's some distinction in Asian culture, but it's broad spread. England, Europe, Australia, the United States, it's broad, it's wide. And when you look at all of these environments where it's happening, there is no single causation that can be proven that is consistent across all the cultures where anxiety and depression are raising. The only causation, the only shared causation, like some countries have had economic trouble, others haven't. Some countries have had war, others haven't. Like, you look at all the reasons why, culturally speaking, we might be more anxious and depressed. The only shared causation was the advent of the cell phone, specifically the smartphone, in the hands of people, which came in 2007. And so Jonathan says that you really cannot pinpoint anything else that would have led to that. And so he feels that the surge is absolutely linked to the digital landscape. And it is true that, my goodness, we can't hide our heads in the sand. There are beautiful things of technology, but I think we have to look at all of this, and listen to this thought, okay, that kids born in the late 90s, okay, we're talking 1990, do you realize that they were the first generation that went through puberty with a smartphone in their hand. And
Yeah,
the
it's pretty
book
recent.
Anxious, it's pretty scary and it's pretty recent. And in Anxious Generation, it says this: it was the largest uncontrolled experiment that humanity has ever performed on its own children. And when you put it in those terms, it's like, oh my goodness, let's just sit back and take a look. There really is um, a causation link that can be seen between where we find ourselves today, the way our kids are functioning, and smartphones, social media, all of those things that go along with that kind of technology.
Why do you think we were so naive about it? I mean, just kind of like, oh, how fun. Here you go. Have one, have two.
That's right. Well, I think that we number one, we probably are far more conforming than transforming to the world than we want to admit. We conform a lot more than we want to confess.
Yeah.
We sometimes are conformed to the world rather than transforming in our minds. But I think it was so convenient. It's so convenient to think, oh my goodness, I can reach my 12-year-old at any time. I can give them a call. And I think that because the research didn't exist, I don't think that phone companies themselves were providing parents with alternatives that were, okay, let's give a phone that's not a smartphone. Let's give a kid an access to text message a parent or to make a phone call economically and conveniently, but we're not going to give them the internet. We're not going to give them social media. Like I think we were so naive as a society, not just church society, but as society, that we just, whatever the technology was, we were excited for it and excited to do it. And we didn't think about options to put things in our kids' hands that didn't have the free reign of the internet and social media.
Well, I know, as like you said, as caring, loving parents, you had rules in place, you had uh protections in place, but even then Kevin still said, "Oh, if I could go back and redo it." So every parent, so if you're listening, this is not about a shame and blame the parents. It's just like we are learning together, but now that time is going by and we're seeing more of the fallout, then it definitely, we cannot just ignore it any longer. And
No.
one of the things that the smartphone, I think, and social media, has really impacted, and this is also another part of the research on the ability of how young people and kids do relationships now. That has had a huge impact, in a world where you just hit the like button and you've got a million friends, or followers or whatever, and it makes you popular. But then when you don't have that connection to your digital device, and all of a sudden there's loneliness and everything just feels a little empty.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of talk for a moment, you know, how are we teaching our children like to counteract this? Are we helping them to build, those authentic relationships? I mean, what do we do here when it's more important to have followers than it is to have real life friends?
Yeah. Well, I think that this is the thing we have to recognize about the next generation that we are, rearing, that we are pouring into, is that digital interactions are just out of necessity. They're typically brief and they're superficial. We all make jokes about how our kids want to respond to us like K, literally, they don't even say okay anymore. It's like if they're agreeing with you, it's K and the letter K. And, they don't use proper sentences and they don't use periods, and everything is, all these little code, because we want to be as brief and superficial as we can be. Well, the danger of that is that when our digital interactions are brief and shallow, so to speak, our relationships in the real world become to mimic that. It becomes a pattern that we don't know how to engage one another in a more meaningful conversational tone. And then, furthermore, we might even not feel comfortable talking to people in the real world at all. Like sometimes on a college level, we've discussed in the past few years, even seeing this specifically as a COVID consequence. Specifically, the classes that went through COVID at a very critical age, like have really struggled to engage. They're more shy in the classroom. They don't want to talk. They seem to kind of guard their feelings. They have them. We know they have them, but it's like pulling teeth trying to get them to engage. Well, that is the consequence when everything is happening digitally, when interactions are all happening just through smartphones and computers. So, what happens is if we're already uncomfortable with
Mhm.
people, then the phone, like I'm just going to pull mine up here. My phone becomes my hideaway. I can actually use my phone to kind of stay away from you. I don't have to talk to you because, if you walk by me in the hall and I'm worried you're going to say hi to me, if I pull out my phone and act like I'm doing something really important, you're not going to speak to me. So it becomes my protection. It becomes my safety. If someone is an awkward person, makes me uncomfortable, or just maybe is kind of annoying, instead of learning how to relationally connect with awkward people, my phone, I just pretend that I'm really busy with my phone. And so what's happening is that we are getting less skilled at relating to one another. And to be honest, I think some adults struggle with this too. Like I
Yeah,
think adults are using
absolutely.
their
Yeah,
phones to
I've seen
disconnect.
that.
Yes, yes. I mean, I know people who say, like, I'm done peopling, like I'm just done. And so what they do is they go and sit in the corner of a room and they get on their phone, and that's their way of self-soothing, of dealing with the fact that they might feel a little mentally overwhelmed or they're not socially comfortable in a space. Well, if we are maybe doing this as grown women, is it very possible that our kids are seeing that and they're doing it as well? So, this relational disconnect is another side effect. It's not just anxiety or depression or self-harming or any of those other things. It's just a general inability to know how to gracefully handle people that we may not feel that we have much in common with, or that it's almost like we just all get so awkward with each other, and our phones soothe us instead of us having to, well, go sit in a room and talk to somebody you don't know.
And we get a little lazy,
Mm,
it is like, I mean, it is a great hiding place, you
yes.
know, but unfortunately, then when we want to come away from that and engage in relationships in a meaningful way, either the people around us lack the skill set or we lack the skill set, and then unfortunately real life exchanges can become so shallow. It
Yeah.
can all be a little artificial. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's important. And like you mentioned earlier, I mean, we're training these young people, our kids, our grandkids, by what they see.
Right.
They come into the house, and if everybody in the room, it's a family gathering, and all the adults have their phones out and are on
Yeah.
them and talking, why would we expect them to do anything different, you know?
Well, and one of the studies we looked at, my husband and I, was actually a UNICEF study, which is, a organization, a global organization that deals with children. And it's not a Christian organization. But here's one of the interesting things they discovered, UNICEF presented in their research, and that is that children will be more likely to have unhealthy engagement online. Now, what they mean by that is maybe even like engaging strangers, engaging people they shouldn't, but also just to excessively use their phone. Children will fall into those pitfalls if they're more likely to fall into those pitfalls if their other areas of life are not satisfying. So
Mhm.
if we as moms and dads and grandmas and grandpas, if we don't build healthy connection to our kids, in a sense, we're almost setting them up to utilize online digital strategies as their own soothing mechanism. If we don't work harder and be more intentional about engaging our kids offline, so to speak, they actually are more likely to lean in to online relationships, to lean into excessive phone usage, to lean into things like gaming and whatnot, video game usage and all of those things. Because here's the reality: kids are craving stimulation. They're
Mm-hmm.
craving it. So the point is, if we are not healthy, if we're not intentional, if we're not providing them that that emotional security and feedback and interaction that makes children healthy, we're actually almost sending them to the
Right.
very thing that then we judge them for using. It's like if we don't have family dinners and we're not talking and we're on our phone all the time, but then we look up and we say, "Hey, son, why are you on your phone all the time?" Well, we've actually pushed them to that because we haven't given them and fed their spirit, given them the things they need.
Well, I think that's a good point. What you're talking about is some real practical application, and that's kind of where I want to go for a few minutes. Is this understanding that we do need family dinners, and we need to put the phone down, and we need to ask, "How was your day?" And that intentional thinking through. We have them in the car. We need to have conversations in the car, not just noise going all the time or everybody head down into their phone. But, Laura, that takes work,
Oh, it does. I
you know?
mean, it takes an incredible amount of work. And I mean, I always say parenting is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I mean, like, really. And I feel like I've done a lot of hard things. Like, I mean, I've done a lot of school. Like, I've done 9 years of college. I've kept a really busy schedule. I've taught college kids. Like, okay, yeah. So I've done hard things. Parenting's the hardest.
Yes.
It's the hard, because the thing is, we are asking we are asking of ourselves to be at greater attention, to be on call more often, to be emotionally available, to be intellectually available to our children. And the reason it's getting harder, and this is a very different conversation, so I'm only going to just mention it in passing, but with so many moms working outside the home. And I mean, I've done a lot outside my home as well. So obviously I'm not throwing stones at any mom that's listening today, or grandmother, whatever. But we are exhausted. We are women who are exhausted and stressed and stretched and, all of those heavy things. And then to come home and have intellectual and emotional connection, it's just like,
Right.
we're barely struggling to get the meal on the table. We're barely making it to just help a kid get a math homework done. And then, then we hear this challenge and we're thinking, and I have to have intellectually stimulating conversations. And
It feels like one more thing on the heavy load
yeah,
of life.
it's so hard. And I get that because I've walked that life. I know parenting's hard.
Yes, it is.
Grandparenting's hard. Raising the next generation, it's not easy. But children crave conversation. They, sometimes we think they don't. We think they're not at all interested in us. Here's what I always found on a very practical level. I always found, and this is kind of sad that we lived this cycle, but with our youngest especially, he was the one who had the most tendencies to have, like, digital addiction issues. So we take the phone away, which
Yeah.
in retrospect, we should have just permanently taken it away. But we always used to say
We
to each
didn't know, did we?
other, didn't know. Anyway, what we used to say to each other, my husband and I, is the first 48 hours were awful. It was literally like watching a kid go through detox every
Mhm.
time, every single time. And we had to, like, fortitude, we had to deal with the anger, we had to deal with the what am I going to do? And I have nothing and I'm so like, and then about 48 hours in, it was like we got our child back. Literally.
That's
We got
amazing.
the beautiful soul that we knew our child to be. And like what I realized is then the talking happened and the conversing and the, hey mom, what do you think about, and yes, I'd love to run an errand with you, and let's go do this together, and would you like to, and it was like the engagement came alive again. And I don't think we realize how much the digital world is dumbing down engagement, and if we can detox
Mhm.
ourselves and our kids
Ourselves.
from it, that
Mhm.
we come alive again relationally in a way that's so beautiful. You know, it's not that we ignore that the digital age exists, but like even conversation, not talking at them, but hey, what is the craziest thing you saw online in the past week? How did it make you feel?
Mhm.
What do you think, what do you think the Lord would say about that? Who's the most radical voice that you feel like your friends are listening to? How do you navigate that when they, share things with you at school? How does that make you feel intellectually? Do you think that person has the mind of Christ? Like, if we can use digital things to springboard to real life interactions and conversations. It's not that we act as if it.
Definitely conversations that have to be had, because if everything is as if they're not facing any of that, and it's either, yes, you can have full access to it or you can't have it at all. I think there is this training about, and I think you mentioned this earlier, about how do we set healthy boundaries with them and really teach them. It's what you're talking
Yeah,
about now, that balance between being on your screen, but being with us present in real life. But if you're on your screen, you need to have some really, really guidance and a framework for how to be on that screen.
absolutely. And I think one more point when we're talking about like trying to build the healthy relational side of our kids. One of the things that came up a lot in some of the books we read is how much children really do crave experiences. Now, yes, sometimes they act like the only thing they want to do is be on their phones. But the reality is that experience, not information, is the key to emotional development. So, what does that mean in a practical sense? It means that just talking at our kids, like you should, and this is meaningful, and I'm telling you, and in my day and my generation, like that's all just wah wah wah. That's information. What kids really crave is doing things with us. And I always love when I hear about friends of mine who are so good at this. They like, I have a friend who, when it's spring break week, every single day there's an experience that she's doing with her kids, and I'm thinking, she's a teacher. She could just take that spring break week to sit on her phone and prop her feet up in the armchair and just really have, oh no, every day some kind of experience that they do together as a family. And I watch her kids, how much they love that and they look forward to that. And they're getting older. The oldest one's in the youth group now. But I'm telling you, those kids would not exchange experiences with mom for anything in their world. You know, our
So it's
children.
building them as people, but it's creating incredible memories as well.
Yes, yes, because actually experiences and play is what builds our emotions, our emotional security. Our play helps to build our brains in such a powerful way. And I think if we can embrace that challenge, watch less, or be on your phones less, but do things, give your kids experiences. And that doesn't all have to be expensive and outside the home and outrageous. Whatever it is, we're gonna cook with mom today, or we're gonna do some gardening, or we're gonna go research this thing at the store, we're gonna go drive all over town till we find blah blah blah. Experiences that remind kids that their world lives outside of their digital self.
I love that. That is excellent. What are some practical, just, we have a short amount of time left, but I want to give you an opportunity, um, in this 6 months of teaching, if you just narrowed it down to like, what are some practical helps? What would they be?
I think I think first of all, recognizing that when it comes to digital entertainment, the difference between us and the world, let's say a worldly worldview, as men and women of faith, one of the big differences I would say is that there is no such thing as mindless entertainment.
Right.
That when we engage in entertainment, whether that's our kids are watching reels, or we sit down to watch a family movie, if you choose to do that, or we are encountering something that the world says is mindless entertainment, we can't afford to embrace that philosophy, because everything has some kind of an agenda. It's not all bad. Some of it's very healthy, beautiful, good agendas. But I think what we have to teach our kids to do is to be vigilant, to just always stimulate the conversation. What is the motivation of that form of entertainment? What is the messaging? What do you think it's teaching you about yourself? And how does that line up with the word of God? So, because what's happening is we are believing the lie that you can check out and just be entertained at no consequence to your soul. And I think what we
It's
can
a
start,
lie. It is
yeah,
a lie.
it is a lie. And I think what we have to begin teaching our children is to, at a young age, to develop that healthy filter. We had a mom when we were having this conversation in our parenting class at our church. She raised her hand and she spoke up and she said, my son got the Holy Ghost last year. And she said, a lot of things have changed in our conversation since he got the Holy Ghost. She said, we were watching a family movie together that was very much a family movie. And she said, it was something, very vintage or whatever. But one thing happened in it. And she said, I just kind of had a little prick. And I thought, I don't know if I like that. And she said, instead of just shutting it off, or instead of just telling, now we don't, she looked at her son and she said, son, you have the Holy Ghost. You have the Spirit of God living in you. I have a question. How did that interaction between those characters, how did that make you feel? What do you think God feels about what that was modeling for us? And she said it was the most powerful, beautiful conversation. That's a mom who understands there is no such thing as mindless entertainment. So that's the first thing. I think that's a big takeaway. Um,
Yes, that's excellent.
I think some other practical things is helping children understand the difference between what is real, like what is real in life, and what is edited.
Mhm.
Because children are impressionable. They'll believe everything they see unless we help them discover otherwise. So I think that's a big one. I think, building times and experiences, family interactions that exist both with and without devices. So, like teaching children, we can engage one another with devices, but then we also are very good at engaging one another without devices. I think teaching kids that
How to
self
do
regulate.
relationships. Yeah, how to do real life, real-time relationships.
Yes. And then I think helping them understand what social media is, helping them unlink their value and their self-esteem to things that are so fleeting, and things that are very, I mean, kids don't understand algorithms, that what they see on their phones and who checks and likes and approves of them, that it's driven by math games far greater than any of us. Um, they don't understand that, but what we can teach them is that, that's not where we find our value. That our value is found in the other kids around us, or the young people around us, or the healthy relationships with adults, helping them to replace their value system if it's become skewed.
And I think what you just said, I was thinking as you were talking, adults need to learn this. Yes, we need to learn it first so that we can hand this off to our
Yeah.
children.
Yeah.
My value is not in, you know, the likes or the attention, and just that what is real.
Yes.
it's heartbreaking sometimes to really interact with women that are so discontent with their lives or feel miserable because they're believing what they're seeing on social media is
Yeah.
real, that everybody else has it, everybody else has a better life, everybody has a better, spouse or
Yeah.
better vacations, whatever.
It's so
So I
true.
think what you've pointed out, we could all use more of that.
Absolutely. And I think just as a, we're not here to give hard and fast rules or anything, but just guidelines. One of the interesting takeaways from the book Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, his summary of the whole thing after doing all this research, and interestingly enough, he is a seeking atheist. So he's not saying this from a Christian worldview, but he's very conservative in his conclusions, which to me is very interesting. But here's what he says. His conclusion is that smartphones, now it's if you want a little phone with a text messaging or phone calling ability, that's not what we're talking about. But his premise is that smartphones should never be in the hands of kids until well past puberty. And he recommends not till age 16, which is mind blowing for some of us because we see kids as little as 8, 9 with smartphones in their hands. And I
With a
guess
lot of freedom attached to it as well.
yes, I guess here's what I feel like. If a man who is not even saying this out of a moral compass or a Christ centered motivation, if a man who is simply looking at the scientific research would boldly make a statement that kids shouldn't have phones till they're 16, I feel like I should be on the more conservative side of that scientific evaluation. And that has really given me pause in this conversation.
Well, and I just pray for myself, whether it's, about what I'm viewing or whatever intake it is, like, Lord, eh, I want that prick of conviction that you talked about in that mom, that something just didn't set right. It was just that moment of conviction, and I think that if we ask the Lord to give us wisdom, if we ask him to convict our hearts over anything that displeases him, I mean, that brings him joy to know that we want to please the Lord, and I think that He will partner with us and helping us understand, this is good, this is not good, this will harm you. Everything's not bad, but sometimes it's just not meaningful. Maybe it's not a sin issue, but it's certainly not going to help us become the people that God's always intended for us to be. Help our children to grow up to be good citizens and great human beings, so there's a lot there. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give you like 45 minutes. No, I'm kidding. Just in the next minute, any last thoughts, any words of wisdom you want to leave us with before we end?
There's a scripture in the Old Testament that really captivated me. It's talking about the children of Israel, and it says that they worshiped worthless idols, and in doing so, they became worthless themselves.
Oh,
And such a powerful, powerful scripture. And I think that's the challenge, that I want to live a life as a mom, as a woman. One day if I'm a grandma, I want to live a life that has value, that has worth. And I don't want to place anything as an idol in my life or inadvertently place it in the life of my children, um, that is worthless, and therefore their lives and their value equally becomes worthless. And I think that's the real challenge, to live with value, to live with the richness of what God has for us, to live in relationship beautifully in our homes, in our church families, and if relationships are hard, to do the hard work to make them beautiful. That I think is the challenge. And I don't want anything in my life, I don't want a thing to become my own worthless idol that causes me to be worthless. And that's just what I want to say to all the women who are listening today.
that is powerful. And the scripture says it better than any of us for that wrap up, right? And it is a worthless thing. And I want to please the Lord. And I know all the listeners want to, just please the Lord. Thank you for your untold hours of research into this topic and teaching it and living it and bringing it to us so that we could begin to pray about it, think about it, and process it in our own lives and in our families. And I just want to thank all of our listeners, viewers for tuning in to this episode. And if you have found this conversation helpful, please share it with your friends because we would love for more people to join the conversation. And we'd like to hear from you. So you can connect with us on Facebook or Instagram. Just look for Reflections Magazine UPCI on both of those platforms. And we're excited because next month, there's going to be a really great episode with Darlene McLaughlin, and she's going to share her salvation story, her personal journey from being an exotic dancer to a Christian counselor and pastor's wife, and then her current leadership role in recovery ministry. So that's going to be just a great time together. Until then, take care. God bless you. We'll see you next time.